Thank you, Chris. Okay, thank you, everyone. So I guess a reminder that everything see there's opinions of myself and Saurin, and they don't reflect the official policies and views of GSK. All right, so for today's talk, we cover four main areas. I will deliver a brief background on what was the business driver, why it was important for us to implement the smart SCE. And then so going to more detail, or slightly more detail about the actual solution itself and where Domino fits in. And I will then touch on the change journey. Obviously, this is not just about the technical solution, it's about changing ways of working for our user base. And then finally, a brief recap of lessons learned and key takeaways. Okay, so I'm sure anyone here is probably from life science industry, and in the recent years, I'm sure everyone has seen the explosion of data, right? Not just the volume, but data types, the variety, and then also the important role that data science and statistical programming and stats, statistical analysis, methodologies, etc., play in that entire end-to-end drug development process. So in GSK, in Biostats, so that's our vision statement, is to transform data into knowledge by applying quantitative expertise to make the best possible decision using optimized design in the most efficient manner. Now, I'm sure you have a similar mission or vision statement as well. It may not have the exact same words, but I'm sure in terms of the intent, it's probably very similar. Now, in GSK, we're approaching this in terms of how to get to that vision from two different angles. One is that capabilities, which means that we're building up skill sets within our organization in terms of stat knowledge, methodologies, disease area expertise, and then also soft skills like leadership, communication, influencing, etc. And then on the technology side, we want to make sure that we have a modern, robust, flexible platform where these skilled talents can actually do their best work. And that this is the driver really for us to design, deliver a modern statistical computing environment. At the time this project was kicked off, we're in the midst of merging, if you will, two different business units into a single entity. So GSK always had a vaccines business unit in addition to pharmaceuticals. And for a number of years, they have been operating separately. And I believe it was in 2020 or 2019, the senior leaders at GSK made the decision to merge to benefit from centralization and also efficiency, synergy, etc. So this project also became the perfect solution to deliver a standard platform, a consistent way of working, getting the two groups of people onto the same platforms. And just a bit of background, on the pharma side, we had a very old homegrown bespoke SCE. And then on the vaccine side, there was the SAS Life Science Analytics Framework, or LSAT, and some of you may be familiar with that. So the project was to decommission the two systems and put everybody into this new modern system. And by the way, we also had a R-focused environment because the other two environments didn't really have the capabilities other than SAS. So we had a separate bespoke R environment where folks were doing R work. So the change itself, right? So this is sort of hopefully gives you a sort of flavor of what we were moving from, right? From this traditional way of working to this new modern way of working. And these are sort of the key aspects of the change, if you will. So obviously, for the folks who are familiar with clinical development, that traditionally we use the stat outputs in a static format, right? So your tables and listings, figures, etc. in PDF format, and we would take those to our medical writers, CQ reviews, etc. So part of our solution was this dynamic visualization tool, where reviewers can actually review the data dynamically in a self-service mode versus flipping through pages of PDFs. We also had a cloud-based publishing tool that bundled everything and in a very user-friendly fashion, so the reviewers and medical writers can get to what they need to see easily. And I already mentioned the two legacy systems, and both of them were, traditional, siloed, monolithic, inflexible systems. And what we was looking towards is a single platform where you could do both GXP, non-GXP, exploratory replicated workflow in a very flexible, robust environment with, a business fit for purpose workflows. So that particular concept actually was pretty novel because traditionally SCE is meant for regulated work, right? You do your clinical reporting and submissions, etc., in a very prescriptive fashion. So this was a very novel solution, novel idea that we introduced where you can do everything in a single SCE. So big thanks. Yeah, I'm going to turn over to Saurin.
Thanks, Eileen. I think we got to thank Ching here. To a military perspective, from a tech perspective, or what our journey is done. And I think, as Eileen mentioned, we had two legacy systems already. There's very toward technology, probably in some cases client server technology, tech in particular order. So we had to come up with the design principles of how we approach this. Of course, cloud native, flexible, extensible, multilingual in the sense that we can run different languages, so R, SAS, Python, all together in the same umbrella. Certainly scalable and usable. So these are some of the drivers that we really wanted to focus. And there's not detailed time, not just calling out the words here, but to also ensure what is that flexibility, what is extensibility, scalable, and so on. So we started our journey with a proof of concept, engaging with our Domino partners here. With the tech requirements, again, aligned to those design principles, along with the business capabilities that we wanted to ensure would take us to where we want to go. And through that journey, we got through the POC, based on the success of the POC, identifying what are some of the gaps. We started embracing essentially Domino to bring it into our environment. Then we still had two of our legacy systems up and running. And so we moved the MVP that we delivered. Of course, the definition of MVP will vary from company to company. We delivered on the MVP. Sorry, is that my? Oh boy, sorry. We moved and delivered the MVP in about 9 months. So our journey started December of 21. We had the contract with Domino, had full partnership engagement working with them. We did the MVP, ensuring that it is GXP. There were 4 capabilities needed that we can run our jobs. So GXP was a big component, making sure that it was what our validated environment. We went live in August of 22. In December of 22, we had 2 studies, one in vaccine and virus pharma, adopting our Domino platform. In August of 23, last year, it was considered as a BAU, as in this is our default testing platform. No longer are we allowed to use the legacy systems for new studies coming in. And by December of last year, we had migrated more than 70% of our studies from a legacy system. So that's our journey, quite aggressive. I don't want to tell one thing that if it wasn't from the support from the listing we're managing, and along with pushing us, we would not have completed the journey. So the point is, it's needing to do with setting up traditional tech ways of working. We would have remained long cycle times and everything. So we had the support from LWB from Signal Valley to make sure that silver backtracking, and then you go the REM list. We knowledge to this, working very closely with our stakeholders. They'll be ready to move kind of very short period of time. We'll do also that we are completely migrated all investment from legacy systems in the process of doing that right now. And then the other thing that we did talk about was the fact that we apply Agile framework in terms of our development. So we have continuous framework cycles where we develop additional capabilities, wrappers, integrations, around this product. So the definition of MVP when company for so your organization, what's your MVP, and then how do you iterate and have really embrace the Agile framework to be able to deliver on this. A lot of lessons learned, no doubt, but it certainly gave us a real way to engage the stakeholders and then continue to show value. Just at a high level, though, yeah. So just at a high level, we adopted Domino, which is integrated with GitHub, and then we will get GSK's bespoke customization to and under the umbrella of what we call Meteor. So Meteor is launching your Domino platform, GitHub, as all the customizations that have been built on top of that, essentially creating our SCE. So we use the word Meteor synonymously with Domino, because Domino is our key foundation to it. But a lot of the capabilities that are on Meteor was to make sure it's GXP. And remember, we started this journey almost 3 years ago, and there were some capabilities that were not available. So we wanted to make sure that we addressed it as part of our delivery. But today, I know we've been rushed very close to the Domino, where we've identified some of these capabilities to be part of the core product. And so we will probably go back and say, how do we leverage those core products and remove all the capabilities that we have them under shows? But again, it's some of these things that are listed down. I want to go to the next slide, which is probably important. So when you look at our SDE, a number of different things, there's a very simple inside. You have a Meteor that sits on Domino, allows us to bring data sets, create the analysis data sets through these controlled executions. Like we have workflows that have been defined on top of that. We also have this data access manager layer that have been created on top. And all of this was feasible because of the APIs that are available within Domino. So we leverage the APIs and be able to pre-create some of these components to sort of ease the business or the end users so that they don't have to go and repeat through all the tasks. And then also brings the consistency and standardization. So Meteor actually, the data access managers and metadata that we capture with controlled executions that we run through now. We copy the data and the snapshots into what we call the foundations layer. This is just an Azure layer that we copy. We're Azure-based cloud platform. Of course, the code and everything is on GitHub. The GitHub where we store all of them and that run them on Domino, very well integrated over there. And then to the right, as you see, there are two major components. One is also, which is our publishing system. So all these statistical analysis we publish downstream. Viva is our publishing system. Some of you may be familiar with that. But we publish that into our system called Pulsar and into Viva, through Pulsar into Viva. And the Propino is our visualization on our base visualizations that we built. We built, just to know about the Propino, we built in a way that enables the business to create their own dashboard. So, create a little bit of a self-service, but also some tech capabilities underneath that. And it is largely all with Adam data sets that we have to be able to visual or the user having to visualize through this Rapido platform. Without time for Q&A, so I'll just sort of jump through the more slides.
Okay.
Actually, the problem in last slide here. So just for broad categories from a technology perspective, if I can just share more light. One is our managing technology set solutions. So now we have Domino, we have Kubernetes, we have different IDs that have been deployed. And from a temp perspective, it's very important of how you're managing versions, the upgrades that keep coming. Kubernetes and Domino need to be in sync with regards to the very specific versions as well. So that creates a little bit of a challenge in terms of managing the upgrades of all of this. Even though we have Domino as a platform, the stats that we built or integrated here needs to be given special time and effort to get that done. On the user experience side, we focus largely, there are two buckets, right? One is your build data science team, and then the stats programming team. And we focus largely all the work that we've been doing, what you showing here, is largely on the stats programming side of things. We have 1,000 users of that. Of course, Domino has fantastic platform capabilities into data science. We have just not spent enough time on it, and we will start this year at a new start exploring, but we will go more deeper into this year. But the user experience from his staff programming was to make sure, there was consistency in the ways of working, the ways of load and seal of it. So again, leveraging a lot of the APIs able to standardize, what does the processing look like? Certain templates. I mean, the template was something that was designed by Domino later on, but we had already done things to APIs, how do you design small templates? And it's really building so that you can make the productivity from the end user, but also show, how the online platform like Domino. So my that experience with me is very important. And this is the conversation we have with Domino all the time. So it's not about, can you do this and can I do this? But, sitting from the stats programming perspective and say, how do we make them more productive? What is missing there? So it's not just about key capability, but also, being empathetic to the end user and then identifying ways that we can make their lives much easier. And that work continues, right? It's not an end game. Like because we are this agile ways of working through every piece, I continuously look at these opportunities, how we use it. But I guess what I found out that's an important component because just filling out is not good enough. Data is an example. Great technology, the tech side, everybody's so used to, probably not the same in business level. A lot of opportunity, a huge learning curve. Once the people are over the hump, they probably don't want to go back. But it takes time and recognizing what does that mean? How do we help them? Other ways we can make their lives easier, whether it's very well integrated with Domino. I think these are the considerations that you really have to go through, and that's part of the change management. Maybe we'll touch on that a bit later. Flexibility is still control. So, all these are working, everything is very controlled, everything had to go through IT. Now we have a world where we can make things much more self-service, much more configurable. From Domino perspective, you can pretty much need anybody, the end user or tech person or anybody else. But it comes at a cost, right? It comes at a cost from actually having to take more money for cloud, ensuring that people are not doing things that shouldn't be doing or doing with it. So there are things that you have to consider. What is the level of flexibility you want to enable the end user through this platform? And what is the level of control you want to put? Simply example, anybody can create containers like images and throw an idea out or libraries out. You want to control that because it's great that somebody can do that and someone else who have to route can figure it out. But to experience in a very controlled environment, kind of figuring this out, what is the balance to find. And maybe over time you shift the needle when everybody's much more experienced. But it's the open college roles that's the perspective. What we have in this campus, they are willing to enable any of your non-web environment so that they get a chance to play and bring tools that are needed, or in the controlled environment in production, on the side of this. And then we'll continue to reassess as we get folks that are much more familiar and some of these capabilities. And lastly, performance management for trains. That's an area for a number of reasons we really need to pay attention to. There's an expectation that things are working 10 times better. No, it's just incrementally better, 10 times better for performance. They should be cloud scalable, let's just move on. But a lot of that depends on how your infrastructure is set up. Even at the cloud level, some of you guys probably know, there's a lot of configuration, a lot of learning curves as well, a lot of those elements. The good thing for us is that we've been engaged very closely with them. They have helped us here. But we have done it over the last few months. So up until the end of last year, things were moving around, it was great, things are working. We got over 1,000 users in a very short period, a couple hundred students migrating. And Q1 of this year was a total disaster because we never really thought about how fast the scaling element, how does Domino behave, how is our cloud set up. We did this configuration, a lot of these things a couple of years ago, knowing that to scale, but didn't realize how fast the scaling needed to be done and the changes that we had to make. So that was a lot of work that we going on here. How do you manage your environment in terms of your performance, and then how do you also choose monitor and also we've done the last thing to do was that we've been looking at Domino where the workspace sometimes takes time. So we said, can we provision the nodes ahead of time So they're sort of wrong. So as soon as somebody comes in, they're already available, right? So then we have a look at some of these capabilities and see how do we enhance this from a user experience perspective as well as like when the work done. We recently deployed a tool called RevX from Domino. That is giving us a lot of instance. It's 30 days, but we want to identify where we have some unaccounted areas, let's call it, and certainly areas that we've been able to rectify faster than we would have normally. We've seen things, as an example, in Microsoft Power, their June level, where we have allocated a certain number of yields of VMs, but they were really not allocated to any of the jobs. So we are paying for all of these things, but due to the bug, they were never identified. So I'm hoping that tools like RevX work on us to better understand how is it, not just from a performance, but how is your resource usage as well. And then product monitoring is really cost controls. RevX LL, we said the first thing we need to do is enable the users, make sure they put scale, provision level they need in any of these resources, and make sure everything's working. And then outcomes for now, CIO, you guys are really so much money has been spent. How are we doing cost control? And I'm like, we got us helping the users first and cutting, and then we'll go back. On that end, it's the tremendous pressure on stabilizing as well as cost, reviewing the cost. These monitoring tools are really helpful to understand what those low-hanging fruits that get better away, learn from the trends, and then adopt them. So in terms of monitoring, we relatively deploy. We have a tool called SCE. So I don't know if people have heard of that. We have based on lactation stages, so we have development, or we've already seen slow value come from it, and then we have Grafana as well. So we still have to figure out, on the build that's one of the right tools, but certainly I can say that that's a pretty good component, and certainly encourage because this will come so that you have to whatever. So that's just how I know. I think all of this is that. And one just one to talk is we have the early adopters of Domino in healthcare. Learn from the mistakes we made. We won't make the same mistakes. Make new mistakes, new learnings. And I don't mean mistakes as in mistakes, but we have gone through the journey, and I hope you guys can take advantage of that in the way you were about deploying your environment. That's very happy to talk. But we'll take you right in over ask everybody the coolness slides and we'll help go back.
Thank you, Saurin. Yeah, very nicely said there, because that's what we're here. That's what we're here to share our journey, and hopefully you guys can take advantage of the lessons learned. So let's shift gear a little bit from technology to business and to process and people, I should say. So I sort of alluded to a little earlier that it's not just a technology change. It's really about fundamental mindset shift and behavioral shift in our user base, in this case, clinical stats and statistical programming. So I'm sure everyone agrees with me that in our industry, everyone tends to be risk averse, right? We're in a very regulated environment. Everything we see, double QC, triple QC, make sure there's no mistake, because it's really human lives at stake here. Yeah. So shifting from that mindset to a risk-based approach, and then also giving them the flexibility to do the job in the best way possible while giving them those guardrails. It's kind of weird. It's a new concept because people tend to be following this recipe step by step, right? There's no way to kind of deviate. So it's a definitely different mindset because we are giving them a more flexible system. And behavioral change as well in terms of mindset changes. Again, with the older legacy systems, people they learn a specific way of doing things, and it's very hard. So many years. So it's very hard to change the behavior. A simple example is, we have these dry runs. I'm sure many of you understand what I'm trying to say. Dry runs, and traditionally we used to create a set of reporting effort just to capture a dry run, whereas now with the Power SCE, we don't need to do that anymore. We have snapshots, so everything's still in the actual analysis environment. So, really, actually, it was easier for a new joiner to learn Domino and actually become an expert than some of our new experienced folks at GSK. So now we talked about iterative delivery. So we use safe scaled agile framework to deliver this particular solution, and that meant that from MVP to the next iteration, every iteration adds a bit more to the solution that people are using. So, but it's never everything all of the bells and whistles all at once. So we had to really help people understand what to expect from iteration to iteration. So the expectation setting was important, and the change management required for that. And then lastly, I want to mention, so at GSK, this wasn't the only thing that was happening. There were a lot of changes happening, some business process simplification, organizational changes, lots of things. So how do we actually help people focus on what they need to know and not be overwhelmed, distracted by other changes? It was complex system which we worked to. All right, so I want to touch on the migration a bit. So obviously, in order for us to move to this business as usual mode, it's not just about new studies adopting our new SCE, but it's also about migrating all the in-flight studies from the legacy systems over to our new SCE. And so we attacked this problem, if you will, from 4 different angles. So we had a very comprehensive strategy for migration and decommissioning. We also made sure that active work migration was our top priority. And of course, making sure that whatever we did, it was clearly aligned to GSK data strategy in terms of making complete study available for the data we use. We have a repository where everything is stored. And then two for tools, we work with the tech team to deliver a couple of tools. One is to help us plan based on clinical study milestones to be able to intelligently select which studies should be migrated at what point in time. So we had a planning and selection tool. And of course, we also had a tool for the actual migration of content. So that was an automated tool that we qualified for this effort. And then because of the nature of clinical trials, you do have certain studies that are just extra complex, and we also resorted to manual migration as needed. In terms of the process, we had an end-to-end process where involved, you want to communicate to the users about what studies are going to be migrated, when what work they need to do in order to be prepared for migration, and then after the migration, what they need to do a post-migration check, things like that. So it was a very well-defined process. And then also along that journey, there was constant engagement with the study teams themselves. So they always knew what was going on. And then finally, obviously you can't get it done without people. So we had different leads, whether it's overall migration lead or specific pipeline leads. Everyone was really looking collaboratively and then also engaging the other maintenance functions as well, not just our staff, but clinical ops, clinical science, etc., to make sure that everyone on that study knows when that study is migrating. All right, so then when it goes next, really for our project, so we're continuing to develop and build out additional capabilities for our SCE, and obviously in an iterative fashion, building more automations to deliver more efficiency and activity. And then also I want to mention the whole AI and Gen AI. There's a lot of buzz and hype about that. So we want to be left behind. We're looking also for ways to deliver more efficiency using this AI programmer concept, if you will, to use AI to be your QC, so you don't have to have 2 people doing this programming. You have the human, and then you have the AI QC or programmer. So that's something we're experimenting as well. And of course, I mentioned earlier that the reason we chose Domino was because of this flexibility. We wanted a single platform where we can do exploratory and GSP work. So we are in the midst of expanding on user base to include not just clinical stats and programming, but real-world evidence, CMC, which is the stats that supports manufacturing processes. So basically, anyone with data science and data analytics needs can work in Domino. And then finally, as industry, I'm really happy that we are very collaborative, right? This as a pharma industry, technology is really not our crown jewels, really the actual molecules and assets and vaccines. And in terms of technology, everyone's there with to collaboration, and there are a lot of those things efforts happening to really drive the industry towards a future-proof SCE vision. So lessons learned is just a little quick recap. Obviously, stage started here. That means this combination of tech and business was critical to the success of our project. In terms of GXP, I've probably spent a lot of hours and hours talking about this. But traditionally we had a quality framework that was the one from waterfall life cycle. Software life cycle, sort of that kind of plan. So switching that, aligning that to agile way of delivery, that was a challenge, I would say. And that takes long tries to simplify and keep also convincing the stakeholders that there are better ways and more streamlined and risk-based ways to still deliver quality without losing speed. So automation monitoring, so I'm going to skip that bullet in the interest of time. And change management, and really I should emphasize this enough, right? We can't underestimate the amount of change management needed for this whole project, for this type of effort. So make sure that you partner yourself with a change expert. Don't just rely on, hard-mindedness and kind of retain crew rate, interested in doing change management. I would strongly advise them to against that and actually utilize, change management experts. And lastly, really, thinking about, you guys should actually have a little conversation, the skill about what really is the definition of SCE. So I would strongly encourage us to look beyond, just think beyond the traditional SCE to look at end-to-end. What else can we do to make this ecosystem? It's not like statistical computing ecosystem, right? Are much more robust and future good. I think this is the last slide. So in terms of what we believe defines what SCE, multilingual, extensible, compliant, and unified. Now, for this project, we delivered object via an Agile framework, but with the clinical stats and programming into the study work, we're also starting to adopt Agile framework as well. So really, the combination of Agile with the working in general, future-proof solutions, and really creativity and analytical thinking can really turbocharge the drug development process to bring the best medicine to patients at a pace faster than ever before. So with that, I am going to conclude.